Hi there, and welcome to me again, Audrina Lane, and I'm here with chapter 32 from my book Where Did Your Heart Go? And just a quick little mention to say thank you to Miriam Baker for my lovely scarf. It's gorgeous. Great Christmas present. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started on the next chapter. In the studio, Mitchell put the stereo on and they started to warm up. "How are we going to practice the lift?" Charlie asked, remembering the last time they tried it when she'd been stood on a park bench. "I'm not sure. We may have to bring a mattress down here for unforced landings," he replied, arching his eyebrows, "although my dad might wonder what it's for." "We need a lake like they had in the film." "Well, there's a duck pond in the next park, but it's only 2 inches deep," Mitch laughed. "Ooh, bit cold and shallow for that," Charlie responded. "I'll just have to get it right first time then." "Yes, you will, otherwise we might both be out of the competition if we break anything," Mitch said. "But that's not going to happen, so we'd best get started." "Can we also do a few practices of the fall from my routine?" Charlie asked. "I saw a table in the garden, so we can use that." As the music flowed, they danced, and every time they stepped through the routine they got a bit further and a bit surer of the steps and the way they worked together. Once or twice Mitch shouted when Charlie went wrong, but it was all in good fun, and eventually they sank to the floor, just the lift left to perfect. "Shall we grab a drink?" Mitch asked. He threw her a towel so she could wipe off the sweat that was dripping from her body. "Yeah, great." They realised it was already 2 in the afternoon, and Charlie's stomach let out a small rumble as she gulped down a pint of water. "I'm hungry," she said. "Is there any food around?" Mitchell checked the fridge and found a couple of slices of cold pizza. She finished off hers and gave the crust to Jester, who'd sat down next to her. As they started work on the lift, Charlie knew that it was up to her to launch herself at Mitch with both power and control, then trust him to lift her up high so she could float above him. After a few half attempts they managed to nail the first full lift, and as she slid down his body their emotions were so high that she pulled his lips down to meet hers. Although they were both breathless, they were even more so when they pulled apart and slouched against the wall. "Come on, let's do that again," Mitch said. Charlie wiped her brow and retied her hair, determined that this time it was going to be perfect. As she leapt and rose into the air above Mitch, his strong hands held her solid, as her eyes stretched out to the side, and for those few seconds she closed her eyes and believed that she was baby. In reality, she didn't want to be baby. She wanted to be exactly who she was, Charlotte Eden, in complete and utter love with Mitchell Cook. Deciding to finish on a high note and go back to it for a final run-through in the morning, Charlie grabbed her Take My Breath Away CD and inserted it into the music system. Mitch stood aside and watched as Charlie flowed with the music as it carried her to that deserted airfield from the video. He studied the emotions that crossed her face, perfectly in line with the poignant lyrics of the song. The girls had sorted out their costumes, and apart from the fall at the end, they were almost perfect. Mitchell was amazed by her fluidity and style as he watched her bend and leap until the end part. James returned from the shops and stopped in his tracks when he recognised the music bleeding out from the studio next door. He leaned against the counter and allowed the familiar melody to wash over him. Closing his eyes, he was a young man again, and in his arms he held the love of his life once more. This was an omen if ever he needed one. It was the wake-up call he needed. He had to speak to Mitchell and ask him the all-important question about his new girlfriend and her family. It was time to open up about the past in order to move into the future. James was startled when the studio door opened, and after a quick hi from both of them, he watched as they ran into the garden. He crossed to the sink so that he could watch as they danced across the lawn together towards the garden table. He wondered what they were up to as Charlotte climbed onto the table and then launched herself backwards into Mitchell's waiting arms. His son moved Charlotte down to finish with her outstretched across his knee. She climbed off, and they went through the whole thing again, until on the last one he bent down at the end, and his lips brushed her throat, creeping up until they captured her lips. James stood mesmerised as his son laid his girlfriend out on the grass, her hand scraping through his hair, him holding her close. James looked away, not wanting to spoil their moment, but at the same time he blinked back the memory of a moonlit night in the very same garden, the stars shining brightly in the velvet darkness. The glow from the moon lit up the sun-kissed skin of Steph's slender body as they came together. Quickly he shook off those memories and emotions and started to prepare tea. Darren appeared, saying he was off to see Sophie and wouldn't need any, so it would just be himself, Mitch and Charlie for tea, and some all-important questions that were burning inside him. Part of him wanted to wait until he could just talk to Mitch, but another part wanted answers from Charlotte directly. She could answer his questions for sure, but was he ready to hear the truth? Charlie and Mitch walked back into the kitchen, Mitchell brushing the grass from Charlotte's back as she picked some out of her hair and retied it in a ponytail. "Hope you're both hungry. I'm doing spaghetti bolognese for tea." "Oh yes," Charlotte replied, "I'm starving." "Me too," echoed Mitchell, as he poured them both a drink and they sat down at the kitchen table, their breath ragged from the exertions. "Should be ready in about an hour," James said, pouring himself a glass of red wine and looking at the two of them. "Good practice?" "I recognised the last song that was playing when I came in. It was one of my favourites from the film Top Gun." Charlotte looked startled, and James grew even more worried he was right. This was Steph's daughter. "It's my group's entry for the dance final," Charlie elaborated. "Mum helped me choose the song, and Mitch is helping at the end, as we don't have any guys in our group." "Charlie's group probably going to win in a couple of weeks' time," Mitch claimed. "Nah, Mitchell's group will, and I can't wait to see his take on Thriller," she enthused, as she smiled over at him, their eyes locked, betraying the strength of their true feelings. "I'm going to go up and have a shower now before dinner," Mitch said, standing up, his hand still firmly in Charlotte's. James didn't fail to notice the lust the pair betrayed with their eyes, and hoped they hadn't got too carried away yet. "Tea's ready," James shouted, and Charlie and Mitch soon joined him downstairs. James had laid a table in the dining room, and as they entered he passed Mitch a bottle of beer, and then turned to Charlotte. "Wine or beer?" he asked. "White wine and lemonade if you have it," Charlie replied. The music played on the stereo was from Top Gun. Sitting down for dinner, the food was excellent, and the three of them just sat and ate to start with, until Take My Breath floated from the speakers. Mitchell looked up and across at his dad. "I didn't know you had a copy of this song," he exclaimed, and his father reached over and turned the stereo up slightly. "Yes, it was a favourite of mine back in the day, when I was in love with a girl called Stephanie March," James explained, turning his gaze to watch Charlotte's reaction. "I think you might know her." Charlie glanced at Mitchell, but he just nodded. "She's my mum." The three of them sat there in a moment's silence that seemed to stretch a lifetime. Charlie and Mitch cast anxious glances at each other and then at James, who visibly turned pale and closed his eyes. His hands gripped the edge of the table, the knuckles white. And I'm afraid that's where I'm going to have to leave you this week, so I'm so sorry. But if you do want to read ahead and find out what happened, then by all means purchase a copy of the book. Both the ebook and the paperback are now available on amazon.co.uk and amazon.com. The ebook's pretty cheap, starting at 99p. I think that's equivalent to about $1.30 depending on the exchange rate. So you can read ahead and find out what happens next in chapter 33. Otherwise, I shall expect you back here again next week for chapter 33. And in the meantime, feel free to like and share the video, subscribe to my YouTube page, and also You can get in touch if you do want a signed copy of this, signed by me, straight to you. Then feel free to message me on either Facebook or Twitter, and I can certainly arrange for you to make payment and for me to send it over to you. Anyway, that's enough for now, and I shall see you again next week. Bye bye.